Do you feel it? I mean, truly feel it, deep down in the very marrow of your bones, in that quiet, sacred, and often ignored chamber of your heart where your truest self, your higher self, resides in perfect stillness. It's a subtle, yet relentlessly persistent ache, isn't it? It's not a pain that a doctor can diagnose or a pill can soothe. It is a profoundly spiritual achia, phantom vibration, that hums at a low, constant frequency, just beneath the surface of your noisy, distracting, everyday life. It is the constant, resonant echo of a life you know, with every awakened cell of your being, that you were destined to live. This life isn't just a fantasy. It's a memory of your own potential, a vibrant and multidimensional existence of magnificent purpose, a destiny that your soul meticulously scripted for itself among the swirling nebulae and silent constellations before it ever chose to make the courageous journey into the density of this earthly realm. And yet, here, in the harsh, unforgiving, fluorescent light of the tangible world, that promised life, that divine blueprint, remains agonizingly just beyond your grasp. It shimmers on the distant horizon of your awareness, like a heat haze rising from a long, desolate desert rhoda, beautiful, luminous, and maddening mirage that you can see with perfect clarity, but can never, ever seem to touch. This profound feeling, this sacred discontent that keeps you from ever feeling truly settled or satisfied, is the echo of a holy promise, a divine covenant, your soul sealed with source energy before you even took your first breath of terrestrial air. It was a promise of greatness, but let us be clear, this is not the fleeting, hollow greatness of fame, fortune, or public acclaim. This is the enduring, unshakable greatness of a fully realized spirit, a soul that has learned to express its unique divine frequency without apology or compromise. It was a sacred promise of depth, a solemn commitment to courageously explore the profound mysteries of love, the sacred teachings of loss, and the ecstatic joy of pure creation. It was a promise of profound impact, an agreement to serve as a beacon of unwavering light, a powerful force of loving transformation in a world that so often seems lost in the shadows. But here, in this frantic world of endless deadlines, mundane obligations, and superficial connections, that celestial promise can begin to feel less like a guiding star and more like a haunting. It becomes a persistent ghost that walks silently beside you, a constant, whispering reminder of a potential that feels both gloriously, divinely infinite, and crushingly, agonizingly, and heartbreakingly out of reach. You have seen this man, you have felt his presence, or perhaps, if you dare to be truly, radically honest with yourself in this sacred moment, you have recognized this potent, untamed, and wildly beautiful energy thrumming like a trapped bird within the cage of your own spirit. You see him in the quiet, forgotten corners of a bustling, noisy coffee shop. He isn't mindlessly scrolling through his phone like the rest of the world. His gaze is fixed on something beyond the window pane, an intensity in his eyes that seems to pierce the very veil of this consensual reality. His eyes are alight with a sacred, unquenchable fire, a deep and restless burning for a world that operates on a higher, more harmonious frequency, a reality built not from concrete and steel, but from the shimmering, malleable stardust of his most profound dreams. If you were to dare to open his worn, well-traveled leather notebook, you would find not a meticulously organized to-do list, but a vibrant and chaotic testament to a boundless inner universe. The ink-stained pages are filled to the brim with intricate, impossible designs for utopian cities that float serenely among the clouds, with lyrical, heartbreaking verses that somehow capture the unspeakable sorrow and wordless ecstasy of the human condition, and with revolutionary, world-altering ideas that, if ever implemented, could heal the very fractures of our broken world. Entire universes are born, they flourish, and they die in the elegant, fluid strokes of his pen. Whole galaxies of pure, unadulterated potential are captured and contained in a small vial of ink. Yet, these brilliant, beautiful, and desperately needed worlds remain tragically trapped in two dimensions, forever suspended in the golden, lifeless amber of pure thought. They are never given the sacred foundation of deliberate, conscious action, the essential grounding cord of unwavering commitment, That would allow them to finally break free from the page, to manifest, to become real, to take a breath and begin their own life in this world. He moves through the complex and often treacherous landscape of human connection like a brilliant, beautiful, and utterly unpredictable comet. When he enters someone's life, he doesn't just arrive, he blazes across their inner sky, a stunning celestial event of breathtaking intensity and mesmerizing beauty. For a season, his all-consuming passion feels like the hand of destiny itself. His poetic and profound words feel like prophecy whispered directly from the heavens, and his overwhelming, unconditional love feels like a sacred anointing from the divine. He has the rare and powerful gift of making you believe, with all your heart, that you are an essential character in a story far grander, more epic, and more meaningful than anything you have ever known before. He mirrors back to you the forgotten magnificence of your own soul. But then, just as you begin to settle into the comforting warmth of his radiant light, just as you begin to believe that this celestial fire is here to stay, you notice a subtle but undeniable shift in his trajectory. The gentle but persistent gravitational pull of true, grounded commitment, the daily, unglamorous, and often challenging work of patiently nurturing a shared reality, of meticulously building unbreakable trust, of courageously weathering life's inevitable storms together, side by side begins to exert its inexorable force. And it is a force his free-ranging spirit cannot, or will not, bear. The comet begins to veer off course. He vanishes from your sky as quickly and as dramatically as he appeared, a brilliant streak of light fading into the cold, empty darkness, leaving behind nothing but a shimmering trail of cosmic stardust and a bewildered, broken heart left to wonder if any of it, any of the magic, was ever real at all. He is a master of beginnings, a connoisseur of the intoxicating, high-vibration elixir of the what-if. He thrives in the boundless, unstructured creative energy of a blank canvas, the limitless, romantic promise of a first chapter. But the steady, patient, day-by-day, brick-by-brick work of building, of nurturing, of simply being present in the beautiful but imperfect life he has started to create, this feels like a suffocating cage to his untamable, freedom-loving spirit. The very rhythm of stability, the steady, predictable pulse of a committed routine, sounds to his ears like the slow, deliberate clanging of a prison door. If this deep, soul-level resonance is stirring something profound and perhaps uncomfortable within you, if you feel a flicker of painful but undeniable recognition in the deepest, most secret chambers of your heart, know this, and let this truth anchor you in this moment. You are not alone on this sacred, often bewildering, and ultimately transformative path. Your presence here, right now, encountering these words, is not an accident or a coincidence. It is a moment of divine synchronicity, a signpost from your higher self, an undeniable signal that your own spiritual awakening is not just imminent, but is, in fact, already in motion. Affirm this powerful connection with the universe and with your own soul. Acknowledge this sacred moment of divine alignment by liking this message. Subscribe to this channel to continue this sacred journey of profound self-discovery, soul-level healing, and spiritual integration. And, most importantly, share your own experiences, your own resonance, in the comments below. Let your voice join a growing chorus of awakening souls who are ready to understand the deeper patterns of their lives. Your story is a sacred text, a unique chapter in the grand book of human consciousness. Simply typing "I resonate with this" or the divine frequency code 777 can be a revolutionary act of profound self-validation, a powerful beacon of light for other souls who are navigating this same complex path, and a clear, unwavering signal to the universe that you are finally, truly ready to understand the divine blueprint of your own magnificent life. This soul, this beautiful, brilliant, and heartbreakingly tragic figure, has never truly completed the sacred, archetypal rite of passage into adulthood. Let me be perfectly clear. I am not speaking of the superficial, external markers that our materialistic society uses to measure a man's worth, the college degrees meticulously framed and displayed on an office wall, the prestigious job titles elegantly printed on a crisp business card, the 30-year mortgages that bind a person to a single plot of land and a lifetime of debt. These are mere costumes, masks that we wear in the grand play of society. No, I am speaking of the only transition that holds any real weight in the grand, cosmic ledger of the soul's journey, the arduous, internal journey into the very core of his own being, the conscious and deliberate cultivation of the fertile, dark soil of his soul. He may be a chronological adult, but he has failed to become the wise and benevolent king of his own inner kingdom, and so his realm remains in a state of beautiful, creative chaos. He is a man who chases meaning with the desperate, single-minded ferocity of a starving wolf, his spirit howling with a profound and existential hunger in the vast, lonely wilderness of his own unfulfilled potential. But if you observe him closely, with compassionate, awakened eyes, you will see a subtle but crucial distinction. You will see that what he is truly chasing is not meaning itself, the deep, quiet, enduring substance of a life lived with purpose, but rather the feeling of meaning. He is an addict, and his drug of choice is the ecstatic, high-frequency, dopamine-fueled rush of a new beginning, the intoxicating promise of a fresh, clean start, the thrilling sense of boundless possibility. He is a connoisseur of sunrises, a poet of the dawn, but he cannot bear the long, steady, revealing light of midday. He runs from responsibility, and the unawakened world is quick to pass its judgment, to affix its simplistic and damning label. She is lazy. He is unreliable. He is selfish. He is a commitment phobe. But you, as a student of the soul, must learn to look deeper. You must perceive the subtle energy that drives the action, the hidden wound that motivates the behavior. He runs not because he is inherently lazy or intentionally malicious, but because to his untamed, celestial spirit, the very concept of responsibility feels like a leaden, deadening anchor. In his perception, it is a heavy, rusted chain that would inexorably pull his soaring soul down from the boundless, infinite, azure sky of pure potential and tether him brutally, irrevocably, and for all of eternity, to a single, mundane, imperfect point on the earth. He cannot bear the thought of being just one thing, of living just one life, because in his heart, he still believes he can be everything. He dreams of greatness, and oh, what magnificent, world-altering dreams they are. In the silent, sacred, and expansive theater of his mind, he single-handedly composes symphonies so beautiful they could rearrange the very constellations in the night sky. In his daydreams, he builds global empires of compassion and sustainable innovation. In his quiet moments, he envisions himself as the one who will finally heal the deep, fractured heart of the world. His inner world is a vibrant, breathtaking tapestry woven from threads of heroic deeds and epic, paradigm-shifting creation. Yet, despite the grandeur of his inner vision, he avoids, with every activated fiber of his being, the first small, humble, and mundane step into the world of tangible action. He will talk for hours, with the passion of a prophet and the eloquence of a poet, about the magnificent, awe-inspiring cathedral he will one day design and build to honor the divine. He will describe, in exquisite detail, its impossibly soaring spires that pierce the clouds, its massive stained glass windows that tell the entire story of the cosmos, and its perfect, sacred acoustics that will carry a single whispered prayer directly to the ear of God. But he cannot, bring himself to lay the first brick. Why? If you were to ask him directly, he would likely offer 1,000 plausible, well-reasoned explanations. The time isn't right. He doesn't have the funding. He needs to do more research. The world isn't ready for his vision. But the real truth lies far deeper than these surface-level rationalizations. The truth lies in the very frequency of his soul. To lay a single, imperfect, heavy, earthly brick is to make a definitive choice, and to make a choice is to accept a limitation. For him, this is a sacred and utterly terrifying act of creative alchemy. It is the moment that transforms the infinite, weightless, shimmering gold of pure potential into the finite, tangible, and imperfect form of manifest reality. It is to accept, with profound and heartbreaking finality, that in choosing to build this specific cathedral, on this specific piece of land, at this specific time, he is simultaneously and irrevocably choosing not to build all the other, more perfect, more magnificent cathedrals that currently exist in the shimmering, flawless, and infinitely safer realm of his imagination. His creative energy is celestial, a brilliant, crackling, and untamed lightning storm of pure, unadulterated creative force. It flashes magnificently across the sky of his mind, a spectacular, awe-inspiring display for anyone who happens to be watching. But it remains ungrounded. It never touches the earth to nourish the soil, to provide the spark that could ignite a new and lasting creation. He is not lazy. He is not stupid. You must understand this with every compassionate cell in your body, for judgment will only obscure the deeper spiritual truth. He is trapped. He is a prisoner in a beautiful but desolate cage of his own infinite potential. He is unconsciously and archetypally living out a myth, an ancient, powerful, and deeply human pattern that is as old as consciousness itself. He doesn't even know that he is a character in a story, a sacred and timeless drama that has been playing out in the souls of men for millennia. The great spiritual cartographer of the human psyche, the brilliant and insightful Carl Jung, in his profound wisdom, gave this archetype a name, a vibrational key that unlocks the door to understanding this complex condition. He called him the Puer Aeternus, the eternal boy. Think of him, this eternal boy, as a soul caught in the liminal, in-between space of existence, a spiritual entity existing in a state of perpetual, unresolved transition. He is a divine spark, a radiant fragment of pure, undiluted source energy that has taken on the dense, heavy form of a human man. Yet he fundamentally and stubbornly refuses to fully inhabit his earthly vessel. It is as if he is perpetually standing in the doorway of his own life, with one foot planted firmly in the ethereal, timeless realm of spirit and pure potential, and the other foot tentatively resting in the messy, demanding, material world, tragically unwilling to fully commit to either reality. His spirit, in its untamed essence, remains untethered, floating freely in the celestial realm of pure potentiality, a dimension of endless, exhilarating beginnings where endings are a foreign and terrifying concept, a world where every path is still available, where every choice has not yet been made, and where the heavy, karmic weight of consequence simply does not exist. He is, in the deepest chamber of his heart, a boy, brimming with the unfiltered, wide-eyed wonder of childhood, the raw, untamed creative power of a young god, and the innocent, unwavering belief that absolutely anything is still possible for him. But this beautiful, magical boy is trapped within the hardened, aging, and increasingly weary body of a man who is relentlessly expected by society, by his loved ones, and by the persistent whispers of his own higher self, to navigate the dense, bureaucratic complexities and the relentless, soul-crushing demands of the material world. This fundamental dissonance, this painful and unresolved inner schism between the soaring, eternal boy and the grounded, mortal man, creates an almost unbearable, psycho-spiritual tension within his psyche. It is a deep, seismic fissure that runs through the very core of his being, a fault line that constantly threatens to tear his fragile world apart. His soul, at its very core, has developed a profound and debilitating allergy to limitation. This is not a mere psychological quirk or a personality flaw that can be easily overcome with discipline or a positive attitude. It is a deep, profound, and overarching spiritual condition. The very idea of a boundary, a definition, a container for his energy, a final, irreversible choice, does not simply feel uncomfortable or restrictive to him. It registers in his highly sensitive nervous system as an imminent death sentence. It is an existential threat to the very nature of his being, which he has come to identify with formlessness, with fluidity, and with infinite, boundless potential. He is profoundly, fiercely, and with every available ounce of his life force energy, committed to one single thing, the preservation of his own potential. Yet, he is utterly, paralyzingly, and tragically terrified of that same potential ever actually becoming real. Why this profound, life-altering terror? Because reality, as his sensitive soul perceives it, is inherently and unavoidably imperfect. Reality is messy. Reality has sharp, painful edges. It has unforeseen, often difficult consequences, and it has sad, inevitable ending. Potential, on the other hand, in its pristine, unmanifested state, is utterly flawless. In the safe, warm, and sterile womb of his imagination, his potential is a perfect, shimmering, infinite sphere of pure light, a divine orb that contains all possibilities in a state of harmonious, pre-creative unity. To choose one of those possibilities, to birth a single dream out of that infinite potential and bring it into the harsh light of the world, is to immediately risk its inherent imperfection. It is to risk its inevitable failure in the eyes of others. It is to risk the utterly devastating discovery that the real world, flesh and blood version of his dream, was not as grand, not as beautiful, and not as earth-shatteringly perfect as it was in the sanctuary of his mind. And even more terrifying, perhaps, is the often unconscious risk of its resounding success. Because what, in this world, does success truly bring? It brings a whole new set of responsibilities. It brings a new, higher level of expectation from the world. And, most frightening of all to the eternal boy, it brings a solid, defined, and publicly recognized identity that he can no longer easily escape, shift, or transcend. If he finally writes that brilliant, world-changing novel, he is no longer the mysterious, romantic man who could one day write a brilliant novel. He is now, and perhaps forever, the author of that particular book, with all the pressures, criticisms, and expectations that title entails. He is a reluctant king who staunchly refuses to sit on the throne of his own life. He infinitely prefers to wander the kingdom in the anonymous disguise of a commoner, dreaming of all the magnificent, wise, and compassionate ways he might rule one day. Because to actually don the heavy golden crown and pick up the weighty, irreversible scepter would mean that he would have to make actual decisions about laws, about justice, about the future of his people that would forever and irrevocably define his reign, and in doing so, mercilessly extinguish all the other possible, perhaps even better, reigns that he could have had. His identity is a fluid, shimmering, and ever-changing body of water, and he guards that life-giving fluidity as his most sacred and precious possession. This deeply ingrained fear of becoming real, this paralyzing terror of tangible manifestation, is, at its most fundamental and archetypal core, a profound and pervasive fear of death. But let us be exceptionally clear on this point. It is not the physical death of the body that he fears. In fact, he may appear to be a courageous risk-taker, an adrenaline junkie, a man who recklessly flirts with physical danger as just another potent form of escape from the deeper, more terrifying inner dangers. No, the death he fears is far more subtle, far more insidious, and, to his particular spiritual constitution, far more absolute. He fears the thousand smaller deaths, the endless tiny crucifixions of the ego that are required to live a full, authentic, courageous, and grounded human life. He fears, above all else, the death of freedom. To his untethered soul, which has come to equate true freedom with the preservation of infinite, unrestricted choice, every single act of commitment is a profound and painful sacrifice, a sorrowful closing of a sacred, star-dusted door to another reality. To commit to one single career path, no matter how fulfilling it might be, is to consciously experience the slow, agonizing death of the astronaut, the painter, the philosopher, and the desert-dwelling monk that he also could have been. To commit his whole heart to one person, no matter how profound that connection, is to be forced to grieve the perceived death of all the other potential soulmates he might have found in all the other parallel timelines he might have explored. He desperately wants to be everything, to experience everything, all at once, and in this profoundly human, desperate attempt to hold on to all possibilities, he ultimately, and tragically, becomes nothing concrete at all. He is a luminous but insubstantial ghost, haunting the hallways of his own life story. He fears the death of possibility, which has become not just a preference, but his most cherished and fiercely defended possession, his ultimate source of comfort, validation, and personal identity. As long as he doesn't truly choose, as long as he keeps all his options open, anything is still possible. The future stretches out before him like a wide-open, shimmering, and divinely beautiful field of pure, unadulterated potential. In this magical field, he can be a great artist, a visionary entrepreneur, a world-changing spiritual guru, and a fearless, wandering adventurer. He can be all of these magnificent things at once in the grand, echoing, and perfectly safe cathedral of his own mind. The moment he dedicates himself to a single, concrete path, the moment he makes the conscious choice to pour his precious and finite life force into one particular vessel, all the other shimmering possibilities wither and die on the vine. And this loss, to his exquisitely sensitive spirit, feels as real, as brutal, and as painful as the violent amputation of a vital part of himself. It is a sacrifice of self that he is simply not willing or able to make. And finally, on the deepest, most unconscious level, he fears the death of being special. In the protected, insulated, and perfectly controlled realm of his rich fantasy life, he is always the hero of the story. He is the chosen one, the unrecognized genius, the misunderstood prophet whose time has not yet come. His sense of specialness, of being uniquely gifted, is kept pristine, untested, and therefore, in his mind, absolutely perfect. To bring his unique gifts and talents out into the real world is to subject them to the harsh, unforgiving, and often brutal tribunal of reality. It is to risk judgment, criticism, competition, and perhaps worst of all, utter indifference from a world that may not see or appreciate his genius. It is to stand psychically naked in the chaotic public square of life and risk the crushing, soul-destroying discovery that his cherished sense of specialness might not be as special as he so desperately needed to believe. The potential for this deep narcissistic wound is so great, so existentially threatening, that he would rather keep his genius a carefully guarded secret, even from himself, than risk finding out it isn't real. So, to protect himself from these perceived deaths, he ingeniously keeps his entire existence in what can only be described as a perpetual and exhausting draft mode. His life becomes a gallery of beautiful, unfinished sketches, a library of promising but incomplete first acts, a series of endless dress rehearsals for a grand, magnificent performance that never, ever opens to the public. He is forever practicing, preparing, refining, and planning for a life that he never actually begins to live. To finally commit his divine, creative energy, to ground his formidable imaginative power into the rich soil of the world, means to choose. And to choose, for the Puer, is to kill. You must try to understand the sheer, psychic violence of this internal perception. For him, choosing a path is not a joyful act of self-creation. It is a brutal act of self-mutilation. It is to consciously and deliberately take up a sacred, gleaming sword and mercilessly slay all the other fantasy versions of himself, all the other beautiful, shimmering, and perhaps even better lives that he could have lived. And that, to the very core of the eternal boy's soul, is an unbearable, unthinkable act of self-annihilation, a slow and agonizing suicide of the spirit. He is condemned to live in the ethereal, ghostly realm of what could be, and the moment his searching fingertips graze the solid, textured, and imperfect surface of what is, he recoils as if burned by a holy, consuming fire, and retreats instantly back into the cool, safe, sterile, and ultimately lifeless comfort of his magnificent dreams. But how? How in the world does a soul, born with such light and potential, arrive at this treacherous, lonely, and painful precipice? How does a vibrant, powerful, and intelligent man become so fundamentally and tragically trapped in the shimmering, golden amber of his own infinite potential? To truly understand, we must go back. We must take a sacred, compassionate journey back through the corridors of time, back to the very beginning, to the fertile and sacred ground of childhood, where the tiny, almost invisible seeds of these powerful archetypal patterns are first sown. The winding, often unconscious journey of the man-child, the archetypal Puer Aeternus, almost always begins its definitive trajectory in one of two seemingly opposite, yet strangely and profoundly similar, psychological landscapes. Each of these childhood environments, in its own unique and insidious way, fails to provide the essential spiritual and emotional nutrients required for a young boy's sensitive soul to successfully and wholly navigate the treacherous but necessary transition into grounded, responsible, and integrated manhood. The first landscape is the beautiful but deadly gilded cage of overprotection. Imagine, for a moment, a boy who is born into a world of such intense, all-consuming love, such thorough and meticulous cherishing, that he is never, ever allowed to experience the world's natural, necessary, and character-building friction. He is effectively smothered in a form of love that, while almost always well-intentioned, ultimately becomes a slow-acting but potent spiritual poison. It is a form of love that, helicopter-like, anticipates his every need before he can even recognize it and articulate it for himself. It is a love that heroically shields him from every possible discomfort, every potential challenge, and every necessary failure. His mother, or another primary caregiver, often a person who is unconsciously operating from their own unhealed childhood wounds and deep-seated anxieties about the world's dangers, becomes a constant, vigilant, and impenetrable buffer between him and unmediated reality. If he stumbles and falls while learning to walk, she is there in an instant to catch him before his tender knees can even feel the surprising sting of the ground. If he struggles with a difficult puzzle or a school assignment, she immediately steps in to solve it for him, robbing him of the precious opportunity to experience the healthy frustration that inevitably builds the spiritual and mental muscle of resilience. He is constantly, effusively praised for his innate, God-given potential. From his earliest days, he is told that he is a genius, a prodigy, a special gift to the world. His very essence, his being, is celebrated and adored, but his actual, real-world efforts are never truly and rigorously tested. His failures, which are the sacred, alchemical crucibles of all genuine growth and learning, are immediately cushioned, reframed as near successes, or conveniently explained away as someone else's fault. His natural, human discomforts, boredom, frustration, sadness, anger are immediately identified as problems to be solved and are swiftly whisked away with a sugary treat, a new toy, or some other form of alluring distraction. He is given everything a child could seemingly want or need: unconditional love, undivided attention, abundant material, comfort, everything. That is, except the one single thing his developing soul most desperately needs in order to forge its own sovereign strength: autonomy. He never learns how to self-soothe his own emotional states because he is always instantly soothed by an external source. He never learns how to courageously face and overcome resistance because someone else always steps in to magically clear the path before him. He never develops his own spiritual armor, that essential inner fortitude and self-trust necessary to navigate the unpredictable, often harsh, and unforgiving wilderness of adult life, because he has only ever known the perfectly manicured, artificially safe, and climate-controlled gardens of his protected and curated world. As a direct and inevitable result of this loving but ultimately crippling upbringing, the real world, with its unpredictable challenges, its messy and complex social dynamics, and its harsh, unyielding, objective truths, becomes a terrifying and deeply alien landscape in his adult mind. It is not that the world is inherently more cruel to him than to anyone else. It is terrifying to him precisely because it is utterly and completely unfamiliar. He arrives at the doorstep of adulthood without a map, without a compass, and with no confidence whatsoever in his own innate ability to survive its trials, because he was never allowed to get lost, to find his own way back, to learn from his own mistakes, to discover the profound truth that he could, in fact, survive a scraped knee, a bruised ego, or a broken heart. His entire delicate nervous system has been meticulously wired by his early environment for constant comfort, effortless ease, and continuous, unconditional praise. It predictably short-circuits, flooding his body with overwhelming, paralyzing anxiety at the very first sign of genuine, unmediated, real-world adversity. He is, in essence, a beautifully equipped but completely untrained soldier, being sent into a complex and dangerous war without ever having gone through even the most basic training. Then there is the other version, the other path that leads to the same destination. This is the soul who grows up not in a gilded cage of too much, but in the stark, barren, emotional wasteland of not enough. This is the boy who is not told he's special. He is told nothing at all. He is a quiet, invisible ghost haunting the hallways of his own childhood. He grows up in a home where his parents may be physically presente. They may provide the basic necessities of food, shelter, and clothing, but they are profoundly, devastatingly, and unforgivably emotionally absent. In his world, there is no mirroring for his burgeoning, confusing feelings. When he looks into his parents' empty, tired eyes, he sees no joyful or compassionate reflection of his own inner state. There is no validation for his rich and vibrant inner world. His childhood joys are dismissed as silly. His deep fears are ridiculed as weakness, and his profound sorrows are ignored as inconvenient. There is no wise, steady, and loving guidance for his developing soul as it begins to grapple with the monumental questions of life, love, and his place in the world. This profound and pervasive neglect may be the direct result of overt and recognizable trauma in the household, crippling addiction, untreated mental illness, overt physical or emotional abuse. Or it might be a more subtle, more insidious, and therefore more confusing sense of being fundamentally unseen, unheard, and unvalued by parents who are themselves the walking wounded, emotionally stunted and completely shut down by their own unhealed pasts. Whatever the cause, he is left to raise himself, an emotional orphan tasked with the impossible job of navigating the treacherous, unmapped terrain of his own inner world completely and utterly alone. So where does a child in this desolate, soul-crushing landscape go for safety, for comfort, for a sense of belonging? He has only one viable choice. He retreats inward. He must. It is a brilliant, necessary, and life-saving act of pure self-preservation. He builds vast, intricate, and deeply compelling fantasy worlds inside the boundless architecture of his own mind. These are not just idle, passing daydreams. They are meticulously constructed alternate realities, carefully designed parallel dimensions, where he is finally, blessedly strong, deeply and unconditionally loved, and completely, sovereignly in control. He becomes a dedicated dreamer, not as a luxury or a form of privileged escapism, but out of sheer, desperate, soul-level necessity. His fertile and powerful imagination, his innate ability to create other worlds, becomes his only shelter, his impenetrable fortress, his most sacred and holy temple. It is the one place in the entire universe where no one can hurt him, the one realm where he can finally and safely experience a sense of his own inherent worth, his own formidable power, and his own profound belonging. His dreams are not a frivolous escape from life. They are his life raft, the only thing keeping his head above water in a churning, violent sea of emotional emptiness and existential dread. These richly detailed inner worlds, born of profound pain and excruciating solitude, eventually become his true and primary identity, his most profound and comforting sanctuary, and his most precious, fiercely and jealously guarded secret. The idea of abandoning these self-created, life-saving havens for the cold, indifferent, and often cruel, real world. The very same world that caused him to retreat in the first place would feel like the ultimate, unforgivable act of self-betrayal. It would be akin to a battle-weary soldier abandoning the only fortified bunker that ever kept him safe, in order to wander unarmed and exposed into the heart of a raging, active enemy territory. His primary allegiance, therefore, is not to the outer world, which has shown him nothing but painful indifference, but to his own inner world, which has been his only consistent and reliable source of salvation and grace. Do you see the tragic, almost perfectly symmetrical irony of this profound spiritual predicament? It is a sacred paradox that must be held with immense compassion. Whether the boy is raised in the suffocating, gilded cage of overprotection, or in the desolate, barren wasteland of emotional neglect, the ultimate, life-defining outcome is hauntingly and heartbreakingly the same. The fragile soil of his childhood was either too saturated with unearned, debilitating comfort, or it was too dry and barren of the essential, life-giving nutrients of love, validation, and guidance. In both of these extreme and damaging cases, the boy never truly completes the sacred, necessary, and archetypal rite of passage into a state of true, grounded, and integrated manhood. He never learns how to safely and effectively anchor his magnificent, brilliant, and soaring spirit in the solid, fertile, and often challenging ground of everyday reality. He never learns how to build a strong and resilient bridge between the vibrant, magical world of his dreams and the mundane, demanding world of his daily life. The archetypal energies of the dreamer and the doer within his psyche remain two separate, tragically unreconciled, and often warring entities. As an inevitable and direct result of this incomplete inner development, he comes to fear the state of adulthood, not because he is inherently immature or irresponsible in his character, but because on a deep, cellular, and often completely unconscious soul level, the very concept of adulthood has been powerfully and indelibly encoded in his nervous system as a place of profound, overwhelming, and existential danger. For the overprotected boy, the threshold of adulthood represents a sudden and terrifying abandonment, the shocking, brutal loss of the ever-present safety net that has always been there to catch him, to rescue him, to protect him from the consequences of his own actions. It is the terrifying, paralyzing prospect of having to face the wild, unpredictable, and often chaotic world completely alone, without the essential skills, the hard-won resilience, or the deep inner fortitude that he was never given the precious opportunity to develop for himself. For the emotionally neglected boy, on the other hand, the state of adulthood represents the potential for the ultimate, soul-crushing failure and the final, devastating betrayal. It is the moment that promises the final, crushing confirmation of the world's cold, harsh indifference to his existence, and it carries the unbearable risk of having his fragile, precious, and self-created inner world completely shattered by the brutal harshness and unforgiving nature of external reality. For both of these archetypal figures, the world of adulthood, with its relentless and unyielding demands for unwavering commitment, personal responsibility, and a deeply grounded presence, feels like the undeniable death of the soul as they know it. It is the painful, unavoidable end of the only identity, the only way of being that they have ever known. And so, what does he do when faced, day after day, with this perpetually perceived threat to his very existence? He stays in constant motion. It is his primary, most deeply ingrained survival strategy. He becomes a relentless seeker of excitement, a devout and tireless devotee at the sacred altar of spontaneity. He instinctively and consistently avoids stability in all its forms, not as a conscious and deliberate act of youthful rebellion against the establishment, but as a deeply unconscious, reflexive act of profound and desperate self-preservation. He becomes a masterful architect of his own impermanence, skillfully arranging his life to be a continuous and exhilarating series of dramatic and promising takeoffs, new cities, new jobs, new lovers, new projects, new spiritual paths, all of which are ingeniously designed to ensure that he never, ever has to experience the terrifying, grounding, and revealing vulnerability of a final committed landing. And here, right at this juncture, is where we encounter the great and profound paradox, the sacred, perplexing twist that makes this particular archetype so deeply confusing for those who try to love him, and so tragically, irresistibly alluring. The Puer Aeternus, the eternal boy, despite his deep inner turmoil, often appears to be more incandescently, more vibrantly, more alive than anyone else in the room. He is rarely a dull, lifeless, or boring figure. On the contrary, he can be so incandescently charming, so magnetically charismatic, and so profoundly inspiring that he can light up an entire room with his mere presence. His direct, unfiltered, and often unmediated connection to the realm of pure potential, to the deep, archetypal wellspring of raw creative energy, makes him seem truly magical, almost otherworldly. He is fiercely, unapologetically passionate, hopelessly and unironically romantic, and emotionally expressive in ways that many more grounded, emotionally constricted, and conventional men are not. He seems, to the uninitiated observer, to be in constant and intimate touch with a deeper, more colorful, more meaningful reality than the gray, flat, mundane world that most people seem to inhabit. He can speak for hours, with the fiery brilliance of a poet and the profound insight of a mystic, about art, about philosophy, about the great and enduring mysteries of the universe. His mind is a beautiful, captivating place to visit. He lives in a self-created world of heightened, dramatic emotion, of grand, sweeping, epic ideas, and for a time he has the rare and potent ability to sweep you up into that intoxicating, high-vibration world right along with him. This, precisely, is why so many people, men and women alike, from all walks of life fall for him. They are drawn to his brilliant, untamed light like moths to a sacred and mysterious flame. They are completely captivated by his unbridled spirit, his seeming and enviable freedom from the mundane, soul-crushing constraints that seem to bind everyone else to a life of quiet desperation. To them, he represents a thrilling return to a more magical, enchanted way of being. He is a living, breathing promise of a life less ordinary, a life filled with adventure, passion, and meaning. But the closer you get, the more you attempt to build a real, tangible, and lasting connection with this ethereal being, the more the beautiful, shimmering magic begins to subtly but surely unravel. The more deeply confusing, frustrating, and heartbreaking it all becomes. One day he is completely, utterly obsessed with you, gazing into your eyes with a rapturous intensity and seeing in you his muse, his goddess, his twin flame, the divine and final answer to all of his soul's deepest and most persistent questions. He makes you feel, with every fiber of your being, like the sacred and irreplaceable center of his entire universe. Then, sometimes in the span of a single day, he becomes emotionally distant, icily cold, and completely unreachable. His once adoring gaze is already fixed on a new, more distant, and more perfect horizon. His elaborate fantasy of spiritual and romantic perfection, which once rested upon you, has already been projected onto a new, unsullied, and unsuspecting canvas. 1 week, he is staying up all night with you, excitedly drafting a detailed, revolutionary business plan. His creative energy seemingly boundless, his visionary clarity absolute, completely and utterly convinced that the two of you, together, are destined to change the very course of the world. The very next week, that same brilliant business plan is gathering a thick layer of dust under a pile of dirty clothes, and he is lost for days, completely unreachable, in the comfortably dissociative, escapist world of an online video game. You might, in your love and compassion, try to rationalize his bewildering and often painful behavior. You might tell yourself that he's just scared, that with enough unwavering love and saintly patience, you can heal him, you can fix him. You might convince yourself that he just needs more time to mature, to finally grow up. But please, hear this profound and difficult truth and let it sink into the deepest parts of your soul. Time does not and cannot grow him. Time will inevitably and mercilessly wrinkle his beautiful skin and gray his youthful hair, but it will not mature his wounded soul, because his core wound is not on the clock. It is not a problem that can be solved in linear time. It exists in the timeless, sacred, and often inaccessible realm of his spirit, a place that exists entirely outside of the ticking hands of the clock. The great and wise spiritual teacher and pioneering depth psychologist, Carl Jung, wrote with his characteristic profound insight, "The Puer Aeternus is the boy who cannot age." He did not mean, of course, that the puer remains forever youthful in his physical appearance, but rather that his spirit remains tragically uninitiated into the deeper mysteries of life, perpetually unable to face, embrace, and integrate the fundamental, grounding responsibilities of a fully lived human life. And the deepest, most poignant tragedy of this powerful and pervasive archetype is that he is not, at his core, malicious. He is not a sociopath. He is not intentionally and consciously trying to hurt you, or to create chaos and heartbreak in his wake. He is simply, and profoundly, incapable of meeting you in the real, tangible, and often messy world of grounded relationship, because he has not yet had the courage to meet the vast, complex, and often terrifying totality of himself. His entire life, his dazzling, almost hypnotic charm, his fleeting and intense passions, his grand, unfinished schemes, and his dramatic, recurring escapes it, is all an elaborate and brilliantly unconsciously constructed fortress. It is a psychological castle with impossibly high walls, a deep, treacherous moat, and a single, heavily guarded drawbridge. And this entire magnificent structure has been built for one singular and desperate purpose: to protect the fragile, wounded, and utterly terrified inner child who resides, alone and trembling, at its very center. This is the sacred child within him, who was either never allowed the freedom or never taught the skills to successfully grow up. This is the precious part of his psyche that remains psychically frozen in time, perpetually reliving the moment of his original, unhealed developmental wound. He guards this child with the fierce, fire-breathing, and ever-vigilant dragon of his highly developed and often narcissistic ego, and he will escape into anything and everything that will successfully keep him from the terrifying, deafening, and ultimately revealing silence of inner stillness, the one and only place where he might finally have to face the devastating truth that he has spent an entire lifetime creatively, desperately, and exhaustingly avoiding. He escapes, time and time again, through a constantly revolving door of romantic and sexual partners, with each new person serving as a temporary, blank screen upon which he can project his impossible, idealized fantasies of perfect, unconditional love. He escapes into the intoxicating, beautiful, and otherworldly realms of art, music, and literature, deeply and passionately identifying with the tragic, misunderstood heroes of the stories, but never managing to create his own lasting masterpiece. He escapes into the comforting, formless, and ultimately soul-destroying embrace of drugs and alcohol, seeking chemical and temporary solutions to what is, at its core, a profound and deeply spiritual problem. He escapes into the cool, abstract, and safely disembodied world of philosophy and intellectualism, endlessly and brilliantly debating the theoretical meaning of life instead of courageously and messily living it. He escapes into the endless, flickering, and dopamine-addled distractions of the digital age, a vast, virtual world of infinite scrolls and conveniently absent consequences, anything but silence, anything but authentic, vulnerable, human-to-human connection, anything but stillness. Because if he ever, for even a moment, stops running, if he truly and courageously allows himself to become still and listen to the subtle whispers of his own soul, he might finally be forced to hear the primal, soul-shattering cry that he has been unconsciously avoiding his entire life. It is the raw, untended, and heartbreaking cry of his own abandoned inner boy, a cry that echoes up from the deepest, darkest well of his own being. It is a desperate, wordless cry that wails, "Where were they when I needed their protection, their guidance, their love? Why didn't anyone prepare me for the sheer, crushing weight of this world? Why does the sacred and life-giving act of responsibility feel, in my body, exactly like death? Why does the beautiful and holy promise of commitment feel, in my soul, like an inescapable, suffocating trap?" And so, just like the beloved but tragic mythical figure of Peter Pan, he finds his ultimate and only refuge in a psychological Neverlander self-created, meticulously maintained inner landscape where he is never, ever the one who is the problem. A world where life remains a beautiful, shimmering, abstract idea, and not a messy, challenging, hands-on discipline. It is a world where love is always a fleeting, thrilling, romantic fantasy, and never a demanding, consistent, and day-to-day relational practice. It is a realm where the fire of passion always burns brightly, intensely, and dramatically like a firework exploding in the night sky, but it never, ever settles into the steady, quiet, consistent, and life-sustaining warmth of a well-tended hearth fire. And now, here, right at this crucial juncture, we arrive at the pivotal, fated twist in the pathy sacred moment of profound, alchemical, and life-altering potential for transformation. The Puer Aeternus is not an evil force to be vanquished, a personal failing to be shamed, or a psychological flaw to be ruthlessly eradicated. You must understand this profound and compassionate spiritual truth. He is simply, and most tragically, incomplete. There is a magnificent, luminous, and divine brilliance that is locked away, often dormant, within this powerful archetype, a sacred and unique gift that our struggling, cynical world so desperately needs. He is, by his very nature, a visionary, an individual capable of seeing new, paradigm-shifting possibilities and perceiving higher, more unifying truths. He is profoundly, almost painfully sensitive, finely attuned to the subtle, invisible energies and the unspoken, often repressed emotions of the world and the people around him. He has a direct, unmediated, and unfiltered access to a deep wellspring of archetypal and transpersonal imagination, a living, breathing connection to the creative, intelligent matrix of the universe itself, a connection that most people, tragically, lost long, long ago in the brutal and soul-crushing process of becoming practical, realistic, and normal. But that raw, untamed, and magnificent brilliance, that unharnessed, creative fire, without the sacred, grounding vessel of structure and the life-giving, anchoring cord of conscious responsibility, inevitably becomes a destructive and uncontrollable wildfire. It rages wildly out of control, consuming everything and everyone in its chaotic and unpredictable path, including, eventually and most tragically, the man himself. It becomes a form of madness. It burns itself out with a brilliant, final flash, leaving behind only the cold, grey ashes of bitterness and regret, and the sorrowful, whispering ghosts of what could have been. And that, right there, is his shadow. It is the tangible, real-world manifestation of his vast but unintegrated potential. He becomes, in the eyes of the world, the man who never finishes what he starts. His life a sad, neglected graveyard of brilliant but tragically abandoned projects. He is the partner who never, ever truly shows up, a loving and enchanting ghost who can never be fully held, who can never be truly counted on. He is the father who knows how to play with his children, but does not know how to protect them, a fun-loving friend to them, but not a foundational pillar of unwavering strength. He is the gifted artist who dreams of creating world-changing beauty, but never brings his creation into being, his masterpiece forever locked away, silent and perfect, within the prison of his own mind. Carl Jung understood this sacred and agonizing tension with a profound depth that few have ever matched. He passionately believed that every single man, at some crucial point in his spiritual journey of individuation, must turn and courageously face this powerful archetype within his own psyche. And the sacred goal of this confrontation is not to kill the boy, for that would be to kill the very source of his magic, his creativity, and his light. The true and holy goal is to integrate him. It is to finally, as a conscious and loving adult, become the wise, patient, and compassionate father to his own wounded inner boy. It is to bring the boundless, beautiful imagination and the fiery, untamed passion of the child into a sacred and harmonious union with the grounded, unwavering responsibility of the adult. It is a holy, alchemical marriage of heaven and earth that must take place within the crucible of his own soul. It is a sacred, lifelong process that is meant to create not a perfect, flawless man, but a whole and integrated one. So what happens, then, when the powerful boy, within, stubbornly and fiercely refuses to die? What happens when the man avoids the sacred and transformative discomfort of genuine growth for so long that his comfortable, familiar, and predictable prison of pure potential becomes his entire, constricted reality? Eventually, with the certainty of a natural law, the fantasy collapses. The universe, in its infinite, unwavering wisdom and its fierce, tough love compassion, will no longer sustain the fragile and life-draining illusion. Life itself will present a profound and unavoidable crisis, a spiritual emergency, a dark night of the soul, that will decisively and irrevocably shatter the once impenetrable walls of his psychological fortress. Maybe he loses the job that he never fully committed his heart and soul to in the first place. Maybe the loving and patient partner he so carelessly took for granted for so many years finally, and with great sorrow, walks away. Maybe he suffers a sudden and serious health crisis that forces his perpetually moving body into a state of prolonged stillness and introspection that he has so successfully and masterfully always avoided. Or maybe, in what is perhaps the most tragic scenario of all, he simply wakes up one quiet, ordinary morning in the deafening silence of his 40th or 50th or 60th year on this planet, and realizes with a sudden, gut-wrenching, soul-sickening clarity that he is completely and utterly surrounded by the dusty, decaying, and pathetic rubble of a lifetime of half-finished dreams, and a long, sad legacy of broken, forgotten, and unhonored promises. That is the precise moment when the real pain, the deep, existential pain, truly begins. It is not the sharp, circumstantial, external pain of a specific, identifiable loss. It is the deep, gnawing, and pervasive inner ache of finally, truly knowing that you have been a frightened, insubstantial ghost running from your own magnificent and precious life. This is the raw, gaping core wound of the Puer Aeternus, finally and mercilessly laid bare. Life keeps moving forward, keeps evolving, keeps happening, all without his full, conscious, and wholehearted participation. And sooner or later, whether he wants to or not, he is forced to confront a single, devastating, and life-altering realization. The very idea of his own celebrated potential is no longer an exciting, hopeful, and comforting fantasy. It has curdled and transformed, over the long, empty years, into a source of profound, deep, and unbearable shame. He begins to feel constantly and profoundly haunted, not by external ghosts or malevolent spirits, but by the sorrowful, accusing ghosts of all the incredible men he could have been, by all the brave and meaningful things he should have done, and by the magnificent, grounded, wise, and powerfully impactful man he might have become, if only, he had found the simple courage to choose, to commit, to land, to stay. This is the treacherous psychological cliff, the profound spiritual precipice that every unhealed man-child eventually and inevitably approaches. And from this terrifying and dizzying vantage point, there are only two possible paths forward. One, he doubles down on his lifelong pattern of denial and avoidance. He angrily and stubbornly refuses to take any personal responsibility for the state of his life. He vehemently blames the world, his unsupportive and wounding parents, his needy and demanding partners, the crushing unfairness of the entire system. He becomes a bitter and hollowed-out caricature of his former charming self, his once dazzling charm curdling into a sharp, biting cynicism, his once inspiring passion souring into a resentful and passive-aggressive bitterness, his once playful wit sharpening into a cruel and wounding sarcasm. He escapes even deeper into the bottomless pit of distraction, desperately and pathetically chasing ever younger partners, ever newer and more grandiose fantasies, anything at all to outrun the relentless, mournful, and ever-present ghost of his own tragically unlived life. Or two, he finally, blessedly, and with a courage he never knew he possessed, stops running. He turns inward. He takes a single, deep, and shuddering breath. And for the very first time in his entire life, he asks the one simple but terrifying question that his entire existence has been so ingeniously and elaborately constructed to avoid. What am I so profoundly and utterly afraid of? This is the sacred, pivotal moment when the real work of healing, the true alchemical journey of the soul, can finally and truly begin. This is where the practice of shadow work ceases to be a detached, intellectual concept from a psychology book and becomes a profound, messy, and embodied reckoning with the totality of his own being. Because to truly and finally leave the comfortable, predictable, but ultimately soul-crushing psychological safety of Neverland, you do not simply grow up by an act of will. You must grieve. It is a necessary, holy, and non-negotiable act of profound and cleansing mourning. You must grieve the tender, trusting innocence that was cruelly stolen from you by early and persistent neglect. Or you must grieve the vibrant, untested innocence that was never allowed to be tested, forged, and transformed into true, resilient strength by the suffocating blanket of overprotection. You must grieve the thousands of brilliant, beautiful dreams that withered and died in the arid, lifeless desert of your chronic avoidance. You must grieve the deep, meaningful, and potentially life-changing relationships that your deep-seated and unconscious fear of genuine intimacy so effectively and repeatedly sabotaged. In this sacred, courageous, and often painful process of grieving, you begin to meet, perhaps for the very first time in your adult life, the lost, forgotten, and exiled parts of your own wounded soul. You finally meet the tender, sensitive, and deeply vulnerable part of you that longs, more than anything else in the entire world, to be truly and unconditionally seen and accepted just as you are. You meet the terrified, trembling part of you that is utterly and completely paralyzed by the catastrophic fear of failure. You meet the young, underdeveloped part of you that still, after all these years, doesn't truly believe that he has what it takes to handle the relentless, crushing demands of real life. And finally, you meet the most fundamental and essential part of your being, the pure and innocent inner child who, at the end of the day, just wants to be held in a safe, loving, and non-judgmental space and told with unwavering, absolute conviction that he is, and has always been, enough, exactly as he is. Carl Jung, in his almost superhuman wisdom and his vast exploration of the human soul, taught us this one fundamental and life-altering truth: integration, not the impossible, ego-driven, and ultimately, soul-crushing pursuit of perfection, is the one true and ultimate goal of all genuine and lasting healing. He famously and brilliantly wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." For the struggling Puer Aeternus, the unconscious is a vast, dark, and uncharted minefield littered with the explosive, unhealed remnants of unmet developmental needs and deeply ungrieved, unacknowledged losses. And until he finally finds the courage to go back, to sacredly and compassionately walk that dangerous, hallowed ground, and to lovingly and patiently reclaim those abandoned, exiled parts of himself, he will continue to unconsciously and compulsively create a life of repeating, predictable chaos, painful, self-inflicted disappointment, and increasingly desperate, fantasy-driven avoidance, all while tragically and mistakenly calling it his bad luck or his inescapable fate. The one and only key to this profound and life-altering spiritual transformation is the bad, willing and conscious experience of symbolic death. He must, with sober and conscious intention, allow the dominant, reigning boy-king inside him to finally die, not in spirit, not in essence, for that would be a tragedy, but in his absolute, tyrannical dominance over the entire psyche. He must consciously and deliberately choose the solid, fertile, and often difficult ground of reality over the fleeting, intoxicating, and ultimately empty glamour of escapist fantasy. He must choose the messy, unpredictable, and often frustrating process of authentic creation over the sterile, perfect, and lifeless safety of inaction. He must choose unwavering, humble devotion to a single, chosen, and meaningful path over the constant, frantic, and ultimately meaningless escape into endless newness. That single, courageous choice is the shift. That is the true and only moment of real, lasting, spiritual alchemy. The vibrant, magical dreamer within him does not die. He is finally given a sacred task, and he becomes the focused, dedicated, and masterful builder. The passionate, romantic lover does not disappear. He is finally given a sacred purpose, and he becomes the steadfast, unwavering, and trustworthy protector. The boy, at long last, finally and fully becomes a man, not by tragically rejecting the beautiful, magical dreams of his sacred youth, but by finally finding the courage and painstakingly developing the skills to anchor those very dreams in the rich, dark, and fertile soil of reality. But please, understand this. This sacred journey of healing and integration is not clean. It is not a neat, linear, or predictable process that can be checked off a list. It is messy, it is often dark, and at times, it is utterly and completely terrifying. There is a profound, valid, and deeply rooted reason that the boy refused to grow up in the first place. For him, the process of growth was never modeled by his caregivers as a safe, desirable, or even possible process. In his early, formative experience, the idea of responsibility felt exactly like a suffocating, inescapable trap. The sacred act of commitment felt precisely and terrifyingly like a final, irreversible death. So, true and lasting healing for the Puer Aeternus is not just about changing his external, observable behaviors. It is about a deep, profound, and somatic repatterning and regulation of his highly sensitive and often dysregulated nervous system. It is about a compassionate, patient, and loving recovery from the subtle but profound effects of developmental trauma. It is about the sacred, challenging, and lifelong work of learning as a conscious and sovereign adult to reparent the abandoned and neglected parts of himself. It is about teaching these young, frozen parts how to safely hold and process discomfort, how to patiently tolerate the anxiety of ambiguity, and how to effectively self-soothe in the overwhelming face of their deepest fears and insecurities. This is precisely why deep, somatic, and archetypal healing modalities like Jungian shadow work, authentic inner child healing, and compassionate parts work are so profoundly and uniquely essential for this specific and difficult type of transformation. They are not quick fixes or intellectual exercises. They are sacred, experiential tools that help the suffering man-child to slowly, gently, and compassionately build a strong and reliable inner fatherer, wise, stable, grounding, and unconditionally loving presence within his own psyche. This newly integrated inner father is the long-awaited part of himself that can finally offer the benevolent structure, the unwavering protection, and the loving, non-judgmental containment that his wild, beautiful, creative, and terrified inner boy has been so desperately yearning for his entire life. And when this sacred, inner, alchemical marriage finally happens, when the wise, grounded inner father and the magical, creative inner boy begin to work in a state of conscious, loving harmony, the resulting transformation is nothing short of miraculous. It is profound, it is lasting, and it is beautiful to behold. He does not, as he so deeply feared, lose his precious magic. On the contrary, he finally learns how to effectively channel it with a newfound sense of focus, purpose, and intention. He does not stop dreaming his magnificent, world-changing dreams. He learns how to patiently and skillfully build his actual, tangible life from the divine and sacred blueprint of those very dreams. He does not stop being a deeply passionate man. He simply learns how to stay, how to commit his fiery passion to something real and lasting, something that can grow, deepen, and flourish over time, even and especially when it is hard and uncomfortable. And perhaps most powerfully and most beautifully of all, he finally learns how to truly, authentically, and unconditionally love not as a needy, grasping child desperately clinging to a mother figure for his sense of validation, safety, and worth, but as a whole, sovereign and grounded man holding sacred, non-invasive, and empowering space for another precious soul to unfurl and to flourish. This, my friends, is what true maturity really is. It is not boring, it is not beige. It is solid, it is grounded, it is deep, it is real, and it is incredibly, divinely powerful. It is the rich, dark, fertile, and sacred soil in which a life of genuine, authentic, and lasting purpose can finally, blessedly, and magnificently grow. So to those of you who painfully recognize the debilitating and recurring patterns of the Puer Aeternus in yourselves, please hear this as your own personal and divine invitation. You do not need to abandon your magnificent, beautiful dreams. The world needs them. You do not need to become someone else, someone more practical, someone more normal. You only need to finally stop running from the vast, complex, and beautiful totality of who you already are. Yes, the world is often painful. Yes, adulthood is often hard, but the constant, frantic, and ultimately soul-crushing avoidance of life is infinitely, immeasurably harder because it slowly, silently, and surely robs you of your very soul. And know this for certain, it is not too late. You can still, right now, in this very moment, become the man you were always destined to be not, in spite of your pain and your complicated past. But precisely because of the profound wisdom, the deep compassion, and the unshakable strength that you will forge in the sacred fire of healing it. And finally, to those of you who love, or have loved, a man-child, please understand this with all the compassion that you can muster in your heart. He is not, and was never, trying to hurt you. He is desperately and unconsciously trying to survive something deep, dark, and terrifying inside of him for which he has no words. You cannot save him, you cannot grow him for him. But you can, and you must, choose yourself. And sometimes, the most loving, The most sacred and the most powerful thing you can do for both of your souls is to lovingly and with great sorrow walk away, to release him from your expectations, and to let him finally face the man in the mirror all alone. Carl Jung believed with all his being that every archetype, every powerful and divine energy that lives within the human psyche must be faced, honored, integrated, and ultimately transcended into a higher form of consciousness. The Puer Aeternus is no exception to this cosmic law. The beautiful, magical boy inside you does not need to be killed. He needs to be loved, he needs to be honored, and he needs to be lovingly fathered into a state of sacred wholeness. And once he is, he does not disappear. He becomes the eternal, inexhaustible, and life-giving source of your most authentic creative fire, your deepest and most compassionate love, your most untamed and courageous freedom, and your most true and radiant soul. And this is not just a fantasy. It is a living, breathing reality, grounded in the unshakable, diamond, hard truth of your own fully integrated and awakened being. That, and only that, is what this weary, broken world truly needs now. Not more frightened boys living in aging men's bodies, pretending to be strong, but more courageous and whole men who have had the immense courage to face their own inner boys and the profound wisdom to choose to become whole.